Peace and blessings, y'all. I come to you all for the final event of this absolutely marvelous 50th Annual Writers Workshop Conference. Thank you all so much for being here, preparing your appetite for this delicious literary meal we're about to indulge in, prepared by Dr. Elizabeth Nunez and literary scholar Ron Frazier. I would like to ask if she is here, Mary Jackson, to stand. She's the administrative assistant, here she is. Let's give her a hand. Who has worked so diligently and so hard to help the Department of English and Modern Languages pull this together. I give a shout out again to all the faculty members of the Department of English and Modern Languages. Wave your hands, stand up, who all helped. I would like to acknowledge also our committee, Professor Adobe Obasi, Dr. Tamara Hill, all those, Dr. Tamala Simmons, all those who helped to pull this together, working on the program booklet, Professor Adobe standing in the back. And I also have to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Alma Vineyard, former chair of the Department of English and Modern Languages. Did she step out? Okay, so it gives me great pleasure to present to you all. First, I'm going to introduce Ron Frazier. Oh, no. Oh. Whew. When you got all your stuff together. All right, Ron Frazier is a visiting associate professor in African American Studies at Penn State University. He taught on the faculty of Temple, Princeton, and Howard universities. Any Howard people in the house? Good, we all CAU up in here. Because y'all know if he said Howard, they'd be like, you know. What do we say when we say CAU? You. All right, CAU. He is the author of Pauline Hopkins and Advocacy Journalism, which is a literary criticism of the 4 historical novels written by Pauline Hopkins. He is the co-editor of Critical Responses about the Black family in Toni Morrison's God Help the Child. He edited a special collection on the meaning of the fiction of novelist Elizabeth Nunez for the Journal of Pan-African Studies, of which I'm proud to say I have an essay. He published an article about Marlon James's novel, A Brief History of 7 Killings, and is working on a manuscript about all of Marlon James' novels. He is currently finishing an edited collection with Ararat Books about the scholarship of Dr. Tony Martin, who is the editor of the Marcus Garvey Library. Dr. Ron Frazier. I met Dr. Frazier a few years ago when he had a symposium on Elizabeth Nunez at the Sankofa bookstore in DC. And now to introduce my colleague, my friend, Dr. Elizabeth Nunez. I first met Dr. Nunez in 1990, I think, at the National Black Arts Festival here in Atlanta, when Rocks Dance had come out, which I absolutely fell in love with and had the honor of teaching this semester. I was cheeky enough when I heard that we had the National Black Writers Conference at Medgar Evers to actually email her and say, could you please invite me to serve on a panel at this conference? As an academic, she understood what I was saying without actually saying it. Because what I was trying to do and actually accomplished was to get a letter inviting me to participate so that my school would pay for it. See how we talk to one another. Because she knew this little 26-year-old absolute junior faculty was not expected to be on panel with Quincy Troop, Mari Evans, Jay California Cooper, with Ishmael Reed, Alice Walker. Everybody were there. So I appreciate that letter. Thus began our 30, journey. Elizabeth has hosted me in her home, and I was given the opportunity to meet another writer, Doris Jean Austin, who later transitioned. And so everywhere I've gone, I've worked to bring Elizabeth Nunez to campus because I so absolutely love her and her writing. So thank you. So this workshop conference sort of represent a convergence of three people Elizabeth Nunez knew at the beginning of our careers. She met me. I had just begun to teach at Georgia Southern University. I think I had been teaching for 1 year. She mentored Tiffany Yannick, who was here yesterday. And she also mentored Edwidge Danticott, who was here today. And I think that speaks to the kind of work that Elizabeth Nunez does. And I am absolutely honored to be one of those people whom she has mentored. She has written letters on my behalf, and she has certainly been one of my staunch supporters. Elizabeth Nunez immigrated to the U.S. from Trinidad after completing high school there. Winner of an American Book Award, an Independent Publishers Award, a PEN Josephine Miles Award, a Hurston Wright Legacy Award. Hurston who? Zora. Wright who? Richard. So y'all know who we talking about here. She is long listed for the IMPAC Dublin International Literary Award. She is the author of a memoir, Not for Everyday Use, and 10 novels, including Now Lila Knows, Even in Paradise, Boundaries, Anna in Between, Prospero's Daughter, which I've taught several times, Grace, Discretion, Bruised Hibiscus. Don't even get me talking about Bruised Hibiscus, which I've taught several times. Beyond the Limbo Silence, and When Rocks Dance. 4 of her novels were selected as New York Times editors. In 2 of her novels, she back to 2 of Shakespeare's plays, Prospero's Daughter, which in review, the New York Times praises Nunez as a master of pacing and plotting, and Even in Paradise, which Kirkus declares is a dazzling epic triumph. Nunez is the co-founder with John Oliver Killings of the National Black Writers Conference and was director of the conference for 14 years with grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities. So serving as that founder and that director of that amazing conference, you can see all the careers that she helped to birth, nurture to success. She is the executive producer of New York Emmy-nominated CUNY television series Black Writers in America. Nunez is also co-editor of the anthology Stories from Blue Latitudes, Caribbean Women Writers at Home and Abroad, and of the collection of essays, Black Writers in the 90s. Now, while she's doing all of this, she's also teaching as well. Here, Nunez has served on the jury for national and international literary prizes awards, including the International Dublin IMPAC Literary Prize, the National Endowment for Humanities Award, the Ernest Gaines. Y'all know Ernest Gaines, right? Wrote A Lesson Before Dying, A Gathering of Old Men. What else? In My Father's House. Anything else? Y'all Googling? And the Fulbright Award for creative writing. She was twice a fellow at the Yaddo and MacDowell Artist Colonies and was on the faculty of Bread Loaf Writers Conference. The Brooklyn Caribbean Literary Festival has named a prize in Nunez's name for Caribbean writers at home and in the diaspora. Nunez received a PhD in English literature from New York University and is a distinguished professor at Hunter College, City University of New York, and now you at Hunter. She was at Mega Evers, where she teaches courses on creative writing, fiction, and Caribbean women writers. I present to your pleasure and delight, Dr. Elizabeth Nunez. And students, when this is over, don't leave. We do have gifts for you all.
Thank you very much. It is a joy to be introduced by Georgine, Dr. Beth. She's correct. I told her this morning I got goosebumps seeing these three women this weekend because I knew all of them, all three, passed through my house and passed through conferences I did. When they were young, they had not written a word, and they were thinking of writing. Georgine, Tiffany Yannick, and Edwidge Danticat. And I see them all at one weekend, just great. Georgine is not just a great writer and scholar and academic and administrator. Those of you who know her know that she has a huge spirit and is extremely generous. So I'm the one that feels fortunate that she is touching my life. And she has done something, extraordinary for me, which is that she teaches my work. And she mentioned to me, I think this needs to be a little lower, because I'm so short. Is it okay? Yeah. Thank you. And she mentioned to me that she teaches my first novel, When Rocks Dance. And Georgine, that came out in 1986. I knew you then, okay? So don't go to 1990. And we are going to be talking about my most recent novel, so it's kind of bookended. And I told Dr. Fraser I just wanted to take 2 minutes to talk about, because when you told me that you are teaching When Rocks Dance, I said, my first novel, you found it? Well, I mean, it just blew my mind. But I thought I would just say to Georgine and to you, what made me write that novel? Because it was my first novel, and at that time I thought I was the big-time feminist. I was balancing a lot of stuff. I was married. I had a stepson, 4 years old, and I had my own child, a year old. I was finishing my doctorate at NYU. I was living in Long Island. I was teaching at Medgevers in Brooklyn with the kind of schedule you get when you now start teaching, which is constant. And there was a moment I remember driving my car on that highway and totally getting off of it. I could have been killed because I was balancing so much. So of course I wanted to write a novel of this feminist, balancing all of this. And then I discovered I didn't know who I was. And the reason I didn't know who I was, I think everybody in this audience is a bit too young to understand what I'm saying. I grew up in an English colony. Trinidad was a colony of England, which meant all the literature I read was by English people. All the geography I learned was about wherever in England. All the flowers and whatever I learned. And my perception of Africa was what the English gave me, as black as I am. The grass skirts, the tom-toms, the whatever, that is it. So here I'm writing about this feminist novel, and I don't know who I am. And so I couldn't write such a novel. I didn't know my identity. And that's where When Rock Stands come in. Because Trinidad and Dr. Luce, who's from Venezuela, I said to her that in Trinidad, we can see Venezuela from the north and the south. Literally, we can see it. It's 7 miles away, which means we share in the oil belt of Venezuela. And that means on the south of Trinidad, we have oil. So my grandparents and great-grandparents used to live there, and I couldn't figure out why we weren't rich. But what they were cocoa farmers, because the industry was cocoa. And why? Because the British wanted to eat chocolate. And so we were one of their colonies. Some people gave sugar so they could sweeten their tea. Some people gave tea so they can have tea. And we did sugarcane as well as cocoa. However, a disease came in the south and began to destroy the cocoa. Well, I remember my father telling me this story. He used to hunt. And he said in the night, they would wrap their fabric around a stick and just dip it in the ground, and it would light up. The oil had surfaced to such a point. Now, this is the question the novel asks, which is the question I asked. If you followed the logical European scientific way of thinking, if you did that, and you had a lot of cocoa plantations that were dying, and somebody came to you with a bunch of money who wanted to buy it, what would you do? You would sell it, right? You would fool them up because you knew they were dying. Now you have to remember the time of the year. We didn't know the value of oil. Why? We are a British colony. How do the British people heat up their place? Coal in Newcastle, right? What do they want us to do? Coal, which we don't have. So oil has no value there. And so you have to have World War I, you have to have the planes. All of a sudden, oil has value. You have to have Ford, all of a sudden, oil has value. So just before that, just on the cusp of that, oil has no more value than the value my father had. Stick his thing in there. And just to think how that oil is right. So let's go on a logical, scientific way of thinking that we honor, that I was taught. This is the way to arrive at truth. The way to arrive at truth is logical, scientific thinking. You would sell it. Now let's take, this is where I said I try to find my identity. We have Obia, we have the Obia man. We have the mystical way of thinking. Now suppose you said you went the other way. The Obia man will tell you the corruption you seek is in yourself. Maybe the land is trying to tell you something. Maybe you need to correct yourself first. And if you had a mystical way of thinking, you wouldn't sell the land. Right? So when I was finished with that novel, Dr. Bess, I was ready to write my next novels because I had developed a true appreciation for another way of thinking, a mystical, spiritual way of thinking that would lead you not only to a truth about your life, but a financial benefit. You understand what I'm saying? So it was an exercise. So that's my little story about that. So it kind of brings me almost to this novel, the 10th novel. So a lot of my novels I'm writing back because I have a kind of anger which doesn't surface until I start writing. And it's the kind of anger of having to find my identity. You have to understand that colonization is not the same as the oppression of slavery in America. It is not the same. By that, what the colonizer wants to do is to affect your mind. The only way a little island like England could control the world, that in America you guys are speaking English. In Australia they are speaking English. Think of it, it's a little tiny island, and we are speaking their language. It's because they knew the secret. And the secret is colonize the mind. Of course, Frantz Fanon has written very well about that. So that for me, all my novels are trying to get that back. And it's not that easy to get it back. It's not that easy. From the minute you're born, all your education has been in a certain way. And it is not that easy. So we come to this novel. The novel is called Now Lila Knows. What is it that Lila knows? The question I ask is a question that Martin Luther King has said to us, that the only way for evil to thrive is when good men say nothing. But let's put the situation in a different way. That I am a Caribbean immigrant. I have come to America. First, I'm an immigrant, which means I have no investment. The investment I have is in myself, to get myself better. Whether you're Caribbean or you're Asian or I don't care what you are. If you are an immigrant, the investment is in yourself and the people back home. If you are a black immigrant, it is not that easy for you to say that the investment is in yourself, because you become very aware that the opportunity you have has been done on the blood and sweat of African Americans. So you can't get away from that. And the skin color, you can't get away from that. So you always have shadowing you the expectation of African Americans saying to you, you can't be just like another immigrant. You can't just come here and gather your little toys and go back home. Now, the African American is not telling you that, but you are aware of it. You cannot escape that. You know, every time you hear on the radio everything, you understand who has opened that door for you. What is the expectation? What do you do? So my novel very simply is questioning that. I write novels not because I know the answer. I write novels to throw my character into a situation and see what they would do. So my girl, Lila, is a professor. She's an immigrant. She witnesses the fatal shooting of a black man by the police. Her fiancé back home says, it's none of your business. Don't get involved. It's none of your business, not your country. And even if you want to have that position, you don't understand racism in America. Don't get involved. The black faculty don't say anything to her. But just what I just said, she is aware, they're shadowing her. She is aware that even her very presence in that institution, which, by the way, is true for all immigrants of color in academia. Don't think otherwise. Don't think that these white institutions will have faculty of color on their campuses if it isn't for African Americans. It's as simple as that. You could pretend. You could say, I'm a big mathematician. I've got degrees up the... They would not want you. Okay? So somebody has said, You've got to open the doors. So her boyfriend is telling her, don't, it's none of your business. She witnessed it, but she knows that they expect her to be a witness of what she's seen and to go to the police. She knows that she should do it. That's what my novel is about. I was going to read a little bit. Do you want me to? I will. So here is, let me say to you something I say all the time. And people think I'm saying it for the first time. I'm hearing it for the first time. Do you guys know the difference between 1964 and 1965? I need some water. No. What happened in 64? What happened in 1964? I just have it in the glass. What happened in 1964? Come on, you know. We are in an HBCU. The Civil Rights Bill was passed in 1964. What was the point of the Civil Rights Bill? Ending what? Ending legal segregation. What happened in 65? Do you know? Huh? 1 year later, 65. Do you know? I want you to know what happened in 65.
Malcolm X.
Nope. Nope. Somebody's saying it here. The last immigration act we have had in this country was in 1965, and that immigration act said what? What did it say? It removed country of origin as a criteria for immigrating. Do you understand what I'm saying? That prior to 1965, in order to immigrate to this big country, there were quotas. And so if you were Northern European, you had like 200,000 could come. If you were in Africa, the whole continent of Africa, you could look it up, it's something like 1,200 a year could come. If you were in my part of the world, put all the islands together, you may be like 1,000, all the islands. If you were in China, if you were in Korea, if you were in India, are you understanding me? So in 1965, when they removed country of origin as a criteria for immigrating, what happened? You check on your people of color in this country and see what time they came. Check it. They came in the 6 days. They came after 65. Now tell me, how does an immigrant of color get away with not knowing that? I write about it. I talk about it. Every time I have a novel, I try to put it there. And, you know, I have an African-American son, and I tell him, it's a shame that you're not saying that. You should make me feel that I have to pay for this. So the influx of Indians, the influx of Koreans, the influx of Africans, the influx of Caribbean people, 1965 Immigration Act, which removed country of origin as a criteria for immigrating. Do you understand me? That's why we haven't had another one, because they realized they made a mistake. That's what's going on now. They realized they made a mistake. Because when they let me in, I get married to somebody and I have a whole bunch of children. So instead of having one person, and then it goes on, it goes on, it goes on, it goes on. And they cannot have another one. That is their problem. Okay, so here it is. I'm taking up your time, Ron.
This is your time. That's right.
So, she's in this is Lila. I set this novel in Vermont because I heard it's the whitest state in America. And believe you me, they had a big conference and they sure as heck invited me in the fall. And I know that's why they invited me. So in this university, there are only 3 black professors, and Lila, who's coming from the Caribbean, sees the fatal shooting of one of the black professors on her way from the airport. So Terence, one of the black professors, who's alive, of course, was walking down the corridor when Lila spotted him. 2 male students flanked him, one of them speaking to him passionately, his hand punching the air. "I didn't expect a visit from you," Terence said, unlocking his office door to let her in. "Sit, sit." This is what happens when you're reading all over the place. She says, "Sit, sit." Lila was aware. Nice. I'm going to go. Lila was aware he was watching her as she scanned his office. It was half the size of hers. There was barely enough space for his desk, 2 chairs, and a bookcase. But there was a window. She walked around it to get a good view. She walked toward it. "You get a great view of the mountains from here," she said to him. "I could have asked for a larger office," he said, "but I liked seeing that mountain. It reminds me that there's a God." Her eyebrows shot up. "Surprise? Did you think I was a heathen, an atheist? Most black Americans believe in God, you know. We are probably the most religious people in America. You can barely walk 2 blocks in a black neighborhood before you run into a church. You must have heard about this Negro spirituals." "Amazing Grace," she said. "Well, we didn't write that one. If you go to the Library of Congress, you'll see the inscription, words, John Newton, melody unknown. But we know where that melody came from. It came from the bowels of the slave ship, from the groans and cries and prayers of enslaved Africans, from the clanking of the iron chains around their legs. Here, listen." She waited as he beat out the sorrowful rhythm on his foot. Thump-thump, 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 the thumps hard and ferocious against the thinly carpeted floor. "John Newton was a captain of a slave ship," he said, stilling his foot. "That's where he heard that painful melody. He had a conversion, but before that he bought and sold human beings, trafficked them on a slave ship that stacked Africans attached to each other like floorboards, heads to feet, feet to heads in the hold of the ship, and then dragged them, chained by their necks and ankles, to my part of the world." He searched her face as if expecting a response from her. And when she said nothing, he added, "Drag them to your part of the world too." "I see Martin Luther King Jr.," she said. "Everybody knows Martin Luther King Jr.," he said gruffly. He stretched his top lips stiffly over his teeth and shook his head. She winced. "And Malcolm X," she said quickly, feeling the sting of his scorn. "You have an excellent photograph of him." And she goes on to say that Malcolm X's mother came from Grenada. So I want to get to this point. "Sit, sit," he pointed to a chair facing his desk. "I shouldn't have talked to you that way, saying it's not your fight. I know racism doesn't only happen in America. What I meant was," he sat down and shoved away a pile of papers in front of him, "but this is our country, Lila. We have to solve our problems. African Americans have to take a lead." There was an intensity in his voice that compelled her to make an admission she had not planned. "I saw when the policeman shot Professor Brown." In an instant, his face darkened, and rows of thin wavelets crossed his forehead. He pressed his hands on his desk and bent towards her, his shoulders raised, the muscles on his neck strained. "Did you tell this to anyone?" "I told Robert." "Robert? My fiancé," she said, "from back home." "So, are you going to report what you saw?" "I'm not sure it would help," she said. "They, the police, may not put too much worth in what I have to say." "And why is that, Lila?" "I'm here only as a visitor, and what, Lila? And I can't be sure of what you saw?" Her fingers twitched nervously. If she reported what she believed she saw, she would have to go to court as a witness. She would need a lawyer. She did not have money for that. And what would be the worth of her word against the word of an American officer of the law? She was here at the pleasure and goodwill of the U.S. government. It was the U.S. government that had granted her visa. Her work permit could be yanked. She could be sent back home. She knew Terence was waiting for her answer. She looked down on her hands. She could not bear the glare from his eyes. But you did see, right? His eyes were still fixed on her. You said you saw. I saw when it happened. I cannot be sure I saw what happened. Terence threw back his head and laughed. It was a laugh without humor, a sad, accusatory laugh. A fine distinction, but a distinction all right between when and what. But I don't blame you, Lila. Like I said, this is not your problem. You can go back to your sunny island. We live here. We have to face the racism here. I wanted you to know, she said softly. To know what? That Professor Brown was innocent. He laughed again. My dear West Indian girl, you do not have to tell us that. We know. We have decades, hundreds of years of knowing. The police are always right. Black men like Ron are always wrong, always guilty in their eyes. He began gathering his books and papers on his desk. I have to go. Those students, he pointed to the door. I told them I'd meet them in the library. He was dismissing her, but his condescension had irked her. My dear West Indian girl, he had said. He let her leave first, standing back politely at the door to let her pass through, and then he walked away in the opposite direction. He was angry with her. She could hear his footsteps clacking noisily down the hallway, and perhaps she had given him reason to be condescending. She was a coward. She had squirmed her way out of taking a stand with her simpering what and when. And yet, she had legitimate reason, sensible reasons for not committing herself to any statement that would implicate her as a witness, that would invalidate the police's claim, accuse him of lying. This was not her country. She could be deported. But she felt ashamed. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Yes, here we go. Thank you, Professor Nunez, for reading from that excerpt that really gets us thinking about Lila. And this is a theme. I'm glad you mentioned When Rocks Dance, that you're occupied. And what you said is the questioning. Novels for you get you to question that what you said, European logic. Why would somebody want to sell this land rich with oil that will soon be a commodity, but wasn't a commodity at the time that you mentioned? So I appreciate, because from When Rocks Dance, you're really questioning that European logic, the value of African culture and your heritage. And I remember Professor Bess Montgomery's awesome article describing Emilia and Virginia and selling the land, and how land is really, the means by which you gain that power. In this novel, I felt for Lila because she was so aware. And the reason, in every one of your novels, you grabbed me emotionally. And the grab for me emotionally in this one was Lila's relationship before she even left Trinidad with Kenton. Yeah. And Kenton, we don't get much about Kenton except from Lila. And Kenton loved Lila. Reminds me similarly of the character Asagai in A Raisin in the Sun. And when I think about your heritage, you mentioned John Oliver Killens, who you said whose notes are all over When Rocks Dance, the early manuscript, his handwritten notes.
I want to give that to someone because that's so amazing. My first novel, John Oliver Killens, he was my mentor, and I have his handwritten notes all over my manuscript. That's right. Every page.
And whose boss, John Oliver Killens' boss when his early job in New York was Lorraine Hansberry at Freedom Magazine. Yes, he was the book review editor. She was the book review editor, and he wrote book reviews for Freedom.
I just think that manuscript should belong to...
Okay. Maybe Clark Atlanta Archives. Absolutely. We
just
just heard yesterday about the novelist as archivist from Tiffany Unique. She mentioned that a novelist has to do that archival research nobody's read about before, and clearly you do archival work. So maybe your work belongs here. And I mentioned Lorraine Hansberry because her character, Asagai, who is from Africa, who Benita falls in love with, reminds me so much of Lila. Because Lila, in her subconscious, is that relationship. A man that she really, truly loved, but as we learn and now Lila knows, leaves her because, according to Lila, Kenton did not think Lila would want to come with him to Africa because of the class. She was, as a Bernard, Lila Bernard, is clearly of a higher class than he was, Kenton Kudjo. He says to her, you are a Bernard, I am a Kudjo. But this, for me, is what drew me into Lila and made me care, that she would have a relationship like that.
But he outs her, you know?
Explain. Mm-hmm.
He outs her. I'm on this journey, and I'm on this journey as an academic, as a scholar, and as a writer, trying to undo, which I'm trying to hope you understand. I am trying to undo an education that I have had. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people don't try to undo it. Okay? And I see them.
Yes, we see them.
I see them. Mm-hmm. I see them back home. I understand what colonization does to you. I don't understand it. I understand it theoretically, but I understand it practically. I understand that the face I give you is not it's not who I am. Okay? It cannot be who I am. And the reason it cannot be who I am is from the moment of my birth, I was told that the British were superior. Now you have to understand that so absolutely. I was reading a novel last week by an Irish writer, and she was talking about the young characters reading the novels of Enid Blyton. Now this is Ireland. I'm in Trinidad. I know what she's talking about. When I was a child of 10, 11, that's what I read. Do you understand? She's in Ireland. Now, you may read that same novel and read that the character was reading Enid Blyton, and it wouldn't mean anything to you. But let me tell you what it meant to me. It meant to me that here I am in a hot country, and these English people were making cucumber sandwiches and were wearing cardigans to the beach. Now, God knows I had no idea what a cardigan was. And for heaven's sakes, putting cucumber between slices of bread. But did I ever want it?
Okay, because you read it.
This is how I thought you should go to the beach.
Right, okay. You read
So
it.
I would sweat myself through, and whatever looked like a cardigan, it had some sleeves in it and whatever. This is it. So last week I'm reading this novel. And I'm saying, yeah, you girl in Ireland, you may be white as you want to be, but you and I are talking about the same darn thing. So I have been on this journey of doing that, and it's a very painful journey.
Those old thoughts of thinking that are so ingrained because it's from our parents and our books.
So when I say that Kenton outed Lila, Kenton said he was going to Niger. And Lila said that Niger was in Nigeria. He outed her.
Absolutely, by that question.
He made her, he didn't even, I hope you saw that in the novel.
Yes, definitely. It would be too much for her. She doesn't even know where it is on a map, much
but
less
that's
live.
not how she presented herself. She presented herself believing fully that she was a black girl.
Cares exactly what Kenton cares about.
And that's how she believed she was herself. That's how she believed she was. But when he tells her, when she thinks that Niger is in Nigeria, she has to confront that she has no appreciation for Africa whatsoever.
Unlike him.
That it is of exotica,
Right.
as it was presented to me.
So that for me made her sympathetic to me. That made me feel sorry for her.
Yeah,
that made me
sorry for
as
her.
the reader, because without fail, your characters, Elizabeth, always draw me in. And she drew me in again because she cares. And she goes.
Made to care, though.
Exactly. She's made to care by the interactions. You mentioned being influenced by writers like the Irish writer Enid Blyton. You go in depth, Elizabeth, on showing us how Lila has been educated through Shakespeare and what she does with Shakespeare. And that in the novel is the reason she is invited to the Lily White Vermont Mayfield College, because of what she does with Shakespeare and the Caliban, which is particularly the Tempest, Shakespeare's play The Tempest, and how the key verb for me, and I love the way you use it, Elizabeth, is appropriation. She was brought there by the chair, white chair, who says, you say that Caliban in The Tempest, who, if you know the story of Caliban, is Prospero, is the Mediterranean man who comes to the island occupied by Caliban, who is castigated by Prospero as a savage, right? Lila reinterprets Caliban, saying that the English are now reappropriating what Caliban did. You know, he is being reappropriated, and she has this novel effect. So what you're doing is questioning who gets to appropriate. That was something very strong.
Yeah.
And she has like a guilty conscience, but then you use Baldwin, you talk about how Baldwin has reappropriated the American experience into his own. So if Baldwin can do it, why can't, and that's her argument, it seems. Lila is saying, why can't these Europeans stop seeing Caliban, Caliban as the savage? So you're doing a lot with Shakespeare, and you're doing a lot with how we live in this age now where a lot of what we do is being reappropriated by the mainstream culture to make it acceptable, you know, even though it was created by denigrating everything African.
But you see, what I'm trying to do, a lot of my novels, I am talking back. I'm talking back. You have given me all this literature, and I have swallowed all this literature. But in that literature, I'm not seeing me. It's one thing not to see me, that's enough. But it's another thing to have me bow down before you. I don't think American literature did that. That is the distinction I'm going to make.
Right, Herman Melville.
That
Toni
American literature may say, I'm not going to talk about, you know, Toni Morrison talks about being on the margins and that kind of stuff. American literature may say, black people don't belong here and that kind of stuff. In the British literature, they don't just want us to just only see them. They want us to genuflect in front of them and to denigrate ourselves. That's a big deal.
Difference.
So imagine me in high school, sitting, just imagine for a second. I am in high school, and my teachers are reading what Caliban says, what Prospero says about Caliban. And he doesn't only say that Caliban is ugly or lazy or anything. He says his vile race is such that only stripes may move it, not kindness. You got it?
Only stripes.
His vile race.
Hits.
So the point is that it goes beyond color. It goes to the race. Your vile race is such that only stripes, he's talking about the cat o' nine tails, beating, may move, not kindness. I'm supposed to like that.
Like, perform it.
I am supposed to believe that.
Perform it.
And I am supposed to also believe what Prospero says. I educated you, and this is what you have given back to me. But the truth is, I am in an island that was colonized. They have educated me, that is true. So you have this contradiction that is very, so what do? How do you work it out? So my reception in the Caribbean is not always positive.
Oh, certainly not. I understand why. Same thing here.
Right. So Sometimes in America, I'm not understood, but when I'm in the Caribbean, they understand me. But they are not appreciative of that. They don't, you're talking about race all the time. You're so Americanized.
That's exactly what her fiance,
That's it.
who
It's
is
so
not Kenton,
Americanized.
but Robert, tells her, as you read, you mentioned when you talked that Robert says stay out of it, but Lila doesn't. And there are a lot of people that her conversations with always speak to her subconscious. And what they say to her is, you should say something. You witnessed it. All these people who were around it when Professor Ron Brown died, you were there. And so Professor Nunez does this incredible job of creating a story where she cannot stay silent, even though she has a fiance and would like to get married, who is telling her to do that. So I encourage everybody in this room to read this novel and appreciate that climax that Professor Nunez builds. And what it is, the reason it's an important climax is because it acknowledges, which is for me the value of Professor Nunez's novels. Every single one, you never depart, but you find a new way to build that suspense. And the value of the novel is the unity between African Americans and African Caribbeans. That is a serious preoccupation. This is something that I know you know, Paul Marshall, the novelist who I know clearly inspired Toni Morrison.
Well, Paul Marshall was a good friend.
Absolutely.
I adored her. I adored her. And in terms of what you are doing, Dr. Beth, the thing that, there are many things that keep changing, so Lila has to go deeper and deeper. But the thing for me that made the ultimate turning point for her was a novel. And it's the power of story, the power of novels. Because all that time, Lila can stay on the fringes. You can tell her what you want, she could stay on the fringes. But when she reads a novel, and you know what that novel was, I always remember when I went, it's in the end.
William Kelly.
William Kelly's novel called,
What's the name of it?
And I should know it by
A Different Drummer.
A Different Drummer. Have any of you read that novel?
William Kelly, A Different Drummer.
So the thing that got Lila when she read that novel, and that is the power of what you do and what the students do. It is a novel, a story, it's the thing that can move us emotionally to change. So in that novel, if you've read it, this man gives up everything. He burns down his place. And Lila doesn't know, she can't understand. The white people are treating you so well. Why do you burn down your place? And she has to come to terms with that, to understand that history. And of course, the story, what really made me refer to that novel is what happens to us as Black writers. We are a fashion plate. We are treated as celebrities.
Okay.
So we are in style when our books come out. And then a new group comes in, and they are in style. And somebody is in style. So the academy is what keeps us alive. It's the academy. So what happened to William Bell is that he had gone to Harvard, and he was very celebrated. But after his 3 novels, they were finished with him. And they found him in his 70s dumpster diving behind a restaurant for food. And his wife said, the reason that he was dumpster diving is that they were finished with that phase. Why don't we have a James Baldwin? Why don't we have a Richard Wright? Why don't we have a Charles Chaplin? We don't have them because that phase is over.
Their phase is over. I think it's up to critics like myself to create.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And the kind of body that Dr. Bess Montgomery has written to create that school of criticism so that we keep the writers alive. It was the academy, to your point, Professor Nunez, that propelled Toni Morrison into popularity, particularly Houston Baker, June Jordan, were professors at universities, and they're like, they have to be pushed. So I want to encourage students, if you see a writer and you're recognizing these themes, don't stop, because I've seen these themes in Professor Nunez's writing. Don't stop to get them popular. Don't stop the work to get them read. Create study groups. For me, that's the foundation for everything. John Oliver Killens created the study group, in a sense, in the Harlem Writers Guild that you were part of, Terry McMillan was part of, and we see the commercial success that can come from that. Study groups is the foundation. You know, talk about novels. What is this novelist doing? And that's what John Oliver Killens did when he was writing book reviews for our Freedom newspaper.
And Black Book Review.
And Black Books
Why do you
Book
think they're
Review.
banning books? Why do you think they're banning books? Because books are powerful. Stories are powerful. You cannot come against a story. And the reason for that is stories hit you here. They hit you here. You could always rationalize stuff, but you cannot rationalize what your heart is saying. So if I want to change you, I will cut the books out. I will cut them out.
And that's
But you
what.
should ask if they have a question.
Absolutely. Now is a good time for any questions. I see my dear friend Maurice Eckstein, who has read your work. He read your memoir, Not for Everyday Use. Powerful memoir. If you haven't read Professor Nunez's memoir, if you have any questions, please come up to the mic and ask Professor Nunez. Or yes.
Edwin Rock says, I know this was a long time ago, one of the most powerful scenes in the novel is when Amelia gives birth to Marina, and she's in the ground, where she has done to create, to birth in her daughter this.
Well, you're asking me to remember something a long time ago. And I honestly can't say I do, but I can say it's about this journey about me. I guess a novel starts with you're excavating your stuff, but it hopefully belongs to everybody, trying to find out who we are and the things that have shaped us. And especially living in this world, which is so materialistic and leads you that way. So as I said, I write novels when I don't know the answer. So I really don't. And I create my characters to work out something that I am myself trying to work out. And that is why a writer needs the scholar.
Thank you.
We do. Because you find us out. You discover us. I mean, when I went to the event you had in
DC.
In DC, and people were presenting on my novels, I was just like, my God, I thought I did all of this in secret. And you're finding me out. But hopefully not me. And this is a little piece that I'm caving out. I am trying to show, of course we know that colonization took our riches away, but that's the easy thing they did. The terrible thing they did is they took our minds away. And I don't think we have appreciated that. So if you want to know about the neo-colonialism that is going on in Africa, if you want to know the neo-colonialism that is going on in the Caribbean, if you want to know the neo-colonialism that is going on in the Philippines or wherever it is, that is because the colonialism works a different way. It works a different way.
That was one of the parts I wanted you to read,
Yes,
where Lila says she does not want to be a tool of neocolonialism when she was thinking about her past. And for me,
At the end. At the end of the novel.
Yes,
People
yes,
always
definitely.
ask, because that's not the only novel I end that
that's
way.
right.
And it's personal. Because I taught at Medgevers for a very long time and didn't know what the college was named after. I just got a big job in the City University of New York. I was an assistant professor, and then I was an associate professor, and I was all the way to the top. Medcavers, I don't know who they is. Nice name to call the college. Nobody was saying that in the college. I cannot believe that. I cannot. From the minute I stepped in that college, they should have told me who I was, who he was. And they should have told me what the debt I owed. From the minute I put my foot there, they should have told me that. You know who told me? One year Dick Gregory came to that college, and I will never forget it. This tall, thin guy.
Same birthday as me. I have the same birthday as Dick Gregory, October 12th. Yeah.
And he said, and I'm sitting in the audience, quite pleased with myself. I got a PhD. I'm faculty, pleased with myself. And he said that every time he opened that door, he was covered in blood up to his feet, his legs, his thighs, all drowning in blood, because he knew that's how he got through that door. Boy, when he said that, I went home and I thought, my God, that's how I'm at Medcavers College. So I'm saying to those of you who are here, who were born here, who have links taking you back, don't let us forget.
Don't let us forget.
Don't let us forget. You're letting us forget.
There was a hand here in the middle, I see. Can you come to the mic? Or speak louder.
Because it's easy to forget.
Or you can speak louder, great. Oh, they want you to come to the mic. Oh, yes. Thank you.
I'm just telling you, don't let us forget. Don't forget what 1965 is, okay? You'll remember it now.
Hello. Lovely meeting you. Okay, so I have a personal question. I'm Nigerian. My parents were immigrants who came here. So I find myself noticing that a lot of my family in Nigeria has Eurocentric values that aren't so good. And I just wonder, coming from you, how do you deal with relationships maybe in your country?
How do I deal with?
Personal relationships with your family. How do you handle
They don't
them?
like it.
Yeah.
No, they don't like it at all. But as I said, I have a son, African-American son, 2 African-American grandchildren, and I tell my son all the time, you are to blame. You are letting me forget. I'm saying, it's easy for me to forget. I'm a big-time person. I got a job in the city university. I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a that. I send this home to my parents. I send turkey at Christmas. I sent whatever it is, right? You're letting me forget. You're letting me not understand how I got here. You are not letting me understand. So they don't like it. They don't like it. When I start, oh, Elizabeth, just shut up. We are so smart. We are this, we are... Yes, I don't care how smart you are, but you'll be still in your own country. Do you understand that? Do you understand that 65 is the same as 64? That 64 ended segregation. 65 ended segregation. It's the same thing. 65 was a Civil Rights Immigration Act. It's the same thing. You're letting people forget. And if you let me forget, I'm happy. It doesn't bother me. So if you ask me that question, when I go back to the Caribbean, I just did a big interview, really. I'm going to send it to you, Dr. Best, because I was really impressed by how they took what I had to say, because these were all Caribbean people. And, you feel good. No, regardless of what kind of immigrant you are, you're moving on the same thing. As I just said, your focus is on yourself and taking it back home. If nobody asks you to do anything, it remains on yourself.
You have to do it yourself. Inspire yourself.
Somebody has to ask you. Somebody has to make it clear to you, how is it you are here? So, when I heard Dick Gregory, And when I understood who Medgar was, and when I saw that photo of his wife, seeing him being shot down in his driveway, I said, oh my God, I'm in a college with this name. Why did he get to be there? But nobody told me that. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm talking about I'm there like 15 years and nobody's told me that.
We have to be reminded of why we're here. I had an interesting conversation with Professor Rooks, who asked me some deep questions that made me think about why I am here. And I think that's the beauty of the novel. Parents can make it a teaching tool, tell their child, when you turn 13, we're going to read Now Lila Knows.
Yeah.
If you're going to be in academia as a black person, you need to read Now Lila Knows.
In this novel, it's not only this novel, but this novel, really, I just came right up against it. Now, I don't know how you let people know it. I appreciate what African Americans do, honestly. I really think I think honestly that the most generous people I have met are African Americans. Sometimes I cannot understand it. I was married to an African American, so I pretty much was constantly in that milieu. But I always was hiding. I always took a sec because I couldn't understand it. How on God's earth are you so generous? And number two, how did you manage to survive? That means you have to be really smart, intellectually, and that means you have to be really emotionally smart to handle those two. Would you let me forget? And in this novel, I don't know if you saw that scene, I wanted to say, and I did say, that when Amadou Diallo and
Babner Louima.
Were they African Americans? No. They were both immigrants. Who the heck came out in the streets?
African.
Who was the mayor of New York at the time? Dinkins. You go anywhere in a previous colony and you will never see a mayor come out and get handcuffed in front of the police department. Now, you may not have noticed that, but I sure as heck noticed that. I'm saying to myself, there is nowhere that's happening. Nowhere you get to that position. You may give a little money, you may talk, but you will not put your body in front of the police department and get handcuffed. For whom? Two immigrants.
Black immigrants.
So I don't know if I'm going to change any. Hopefully you'll read my novel and that would be a starter. But what I want to say to you is what I say to my son. You gotta make me know. You gotta put it in my face. You gotta put it in the face of every Korean, every Indian, every Chinese, every Nigerian. You gotta let them know that before 65, you were not getting here. You were not. There was a quota. And 64, a lot of blood was spilled for 64. And 64 had to do with segregation and civil rights, and 65 had to do with the same. And the reason you're not having an Immigration Act right now is because they saw what that yielded. There's a whole bunch of us here. And if you don't show appreciation, and if you don't pay back, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to be in trouble.
I felt like Lila was following the ancestral duty by the end of the novel.
Absolutely. So at the end of the novel, which I was beginning to say a little bit, is that they then offered her in this white institution a faculty position for another year. And Lila says,
They have to read the novel.
they have to read
Yeah. They have to read the novel. Yes.
They have to read the novel. But it all comes to a conclusion. And the only clue I will give to you is it's what my father said to me. when I was feeling my oats, feeling myself, really big and bad, and felt I should be moving up the ladder, and I should be this and I should be that. My father said to me, Elizabeth, you are in a place that you did not pay for where you are. Let your children do it. But you are in a place that you didn't. So stand back, not stand by, just stand back. I never forget my father telling me that. And it informed a lot of my work. And it made me come to terms with my ambition, because we're all ambitious, we all want to get to the top. But he said, you are in a place, Elizabeth. Stand back. And I now see my son and my grandchildren moving ahead. They can go wherever they want. So we have to read to the end of the novel and see how Lila deals with that.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier and Dr. Nunez. And thank you all for being a part of the 50th Annual Writers' Workshop, making it the success. We leave here today having been fortified, having been rejuvenated, having been taken inside of ourselves, having been reminded that our stories are important, that our stories that we tell externally are a reflection of who we are internally, and we always want to engage our internal selves. We want to celebrate who we are. We want to celebrate our ancestors, and we do that by honoring their memories, by telling the stories, by doing the work. And again, I quote Tiffany Yannick, this work is holy work. And I want you to understand that this is holy work. And because it is holy work, it is of utmost importance that we do that work and we honor that work. We honor that work by being the best we can be, the best of who we can be, the best students that you can be. CAU students, you are paying so much to be here. Understand what it means to be here. Understand the sacrifices that have been made for you to be here. Take your learning seriously, not just your education, but your learning. And on that note, the Department of English and Modern Languages have purchased books for some of you all to have Dr. Elizabeth sign for you.
I do want to say that my mentor, the reason I've become a novelist at all is because of one of you, John Killings from Macon, Georgia.
Yes.
Georgia.
He came to me and I said, John, I had these scribblings. Will you take a look at it? And he looked at it and he said, Elizabeth, you're a writer. That's what you do. So I am forever grateful to Macon, Georgia. And
I say. All right. So, and we also have Dr. Elizabeth also has books to sell for $25 if you're interested in purchasing one as well. So may I have at least 7 students come.
7 students.
Undergraduate students first.